Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. This one is going to be rough, but we need to do it because I always say you should look at these things in order to know that these things exist. If you have to turn away from it, there's probably something wrong with it. So this is Glenn Greenwald from The Intercept. 6 animal rights activists are being charged with felonies for investigation and rescue that led to punishment of a Utah turkey farm. Now, this is somewhat of a long article, but to put it in detail, to give a summary, 6 people went into a farm, Norbus Farm. Norbus calls itself this kind of ethical, humane treatment of turkeys and humane treatment, these mountain-grown turkeys, etc., 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 in Utah. Well, the people who went there found something dramatically different. You had turkeys living in their own shit and piss, literally, not hyperbole. You had turkeys fighting each other, beaking each other, meaning having their beaks cut off because they were beaking each other to death. You had turkeys sick, ill, hepatitis. The company denies that hepatitis was rampant, but they were getting antibiotics and everything else for diseases based upon the living conditions that those turkeys were in. They were shoulder to shoulder in crates. The case was so horrific that there were multiple investigations, or at the very least, this went out in investigations from newsrooms like Fox News, not regular, but regional Fox News. It even became national news, if I'm not mistaken, by CBS, going into the horrific conditions, these startling, horrific conditions that these turkeys were in. Nevertheless, juxtaposed with this nice corporate narrative, like M&Ms, as if M&Ms were real things, that they were chocolate delicious goodness on the inside, as opposed to just sugar. Same thing here. Oh, these are mountain turkeys, these turkeys are happy, this is humane, etc., etc., etc. When you find the reality of it is, these turkeys are living in dire, disgusting, horrible situations. And these people are sold as if they're humane. These people are being prosecuted for revealing this. Literally prosecuted. Now, the ag-gag laws in Utah were struck down by the federal courts. They were using these ag-gag laws in order to prevent people from doing exactly what these people did, exposing the fact that this place is having these disgusting conditions. There's no other way to say it. These are horrible, fucking disgusting people. The repugnant conditions that these animals are in, and they're blind-eyed to it. There's a reason that they have a blind eye to it. That reason has to do with profit, and that has a reason to do with the society that allows them to pursue profit in this way at the expense of animal life. They don't care. They don't care because they're paid not to care. It hurts their bottom line in order to create conditions for these animals that are somewhat reasonable. The animals are going to die anyway, but at the very least, in the time that they're on this planet, they should have a decent life. I had a conversation with a Democrat talking about this, and I was in this phase of I'm not eating anything that's been tortured. And he was like, well, the animals are going to die anyway. I said, so are you. Is it okay if you're in slavery? He was black. Is it okay that you're in slavery? If it's okay that you're going to be an indentured servant for the rest of your life? Just because you're going to die at a certain point doesn't necessarily mean you want to live a fucking shitty existence. I mean, come on. This is fucking horrible. Do you know that the supplier, Pittman Foods, purchased this very specific farm? And Pittman Foods is one of the suppliers to Wholefoods. Wholefoods itself sell, we're ethical and we're serving these animals. These are humane. We're only getting from farms that are decent, upstanding farms. This is not a decent and upstanding farm. The place that you've just come from has horrors. It's absolute horrors. Getting back to the case for the moment. They're prosecuting these people in Utah. They're prosecuting these people using this kind of law, this jury rigging of the law, in order to go after them. Utah had certain ag-gag laws to prevent these people from doing exactly what they did, exposing charlatans and exposing this kind of nastiness that goes on all throughout the United States. The organization that exposed this, that these people belong to, made the point that this is not uncommon. This is standard practice. There's nothing aberrant in the behavior at all. If you talk to the executives looked at the video and said, "Oh my God, we're hurt by this. I can't believe that these farms were doing this." Nonsense. Nonsense. You care about the economic bottom line. In fact, it is those farmers who are there cares about the economic bottom line. There's nobody there looking at them, so there's no reason to treat those animals as anything other than some kind of object. They're alive. They're alive. They suffer. They have families. They care about things. They like space. They have all sorts of personalities. I mean, these are actual living beings. That would shock the shit out of some people that believe that animals have these kind of personalities, but they do. They care for their kids, they breathe, I guess I'm making a point that the distinction between what is a human being and the distinction between an animal is very narrow and is very, very bare. People like to make those distinctions, but they make those distinctions on somewhat of a false premise that we are somehow better, we're somehow more evolved. What is the attribute that you're giving to humanity that makes it okay to kill and murder animals in wholesale torture chambers in this way? If an alien species came to this planet, could they use that same scenario to make it okay to eat human beings? I think human beings would have an issue with that. But by the same token, I suppose animals have an issue with human beings killing and murdering and slaughtering them and keeping them in pens also. This is horrendous on 2 counts. They're trying to use these laws to silence people from exposing these places. And let me get back to this for the moment, because I'm talking about myself. Glenn Greenwald, awesome job on this. Right here. Those rulings left Utah, whose state government is notoriously dominated by its agriculture industry, without its most menacing weapon to punish people who expose abuses on factory farms. Charging them with felony theft instead appears crafted to perform the same function. The new prosecution seems to be a clear attempt to perform an end run around the death of the ag-gag law. That's exactly what it is. They're charging them with prosecution because they don't have the ag-gag laws to go after the people who exposed this farm. This is amazing. This is absolutely amazing and outlandish. In February of this year, Norbest was purchased by Pittman Farms of California, a supplier of Whole Foods. As the Intercept reported last September, Pittman itself had struggles with accusations of abuse of animals at its farms. But now that Norbest is part of Pittman, it appears to be the case where corporate supplier of Whole Foods, which touts itself as selling the healthiest and most organic products, is pressing charges against people who expose animal abuse and threat to the public health. Requests for comments submitted to the Utah State Attorney's Office and Norbest was unanswered at the publication of this article. How does Whole Foods know that the food that it's getting is humane? It has a vested interest in lying about it. It has a vested interest in telling people that. That's his motto. That's his brand. But how does Whole Foods know? How do the people know that the food that they're getting is done in a humane way? Just like this place. How do they absolutely know that the food that they're getting is humane, that those animals aren't being tortured? I went through this period, and I'm still to some degree in this period, where I have pangs about eating animals. I think it's intellectually dishonest for me to make this kind of clear distinction between what it means to be a person versus what it means to be an animal, and this idea of life and why it's okay to destroy life in one sense, but it's not okay to do it in another sense. Why don't we eat other people? And it's the only reason that we don't eat other people is because they have personalities and they're just like us. But if you can make those same distinctions for the animals, I don't understand the distinction. That's all. I don't see this distinction of why it's okay to do this to animals, but it's not okay to do this to people. And it seems extraordinarily self-serving of, well, I'm a person and I don't want this shit done to me. But it is okay to torture and make these other creatures suffer. They don't talk, so it's okay to do it. They don't bitch in the same way that we bitch. And they don't have guns and weapons and all this other stuff. This is all I'm going to say. There are a lot of people out there who are some like me who have these pangs of guilt associated with eating meat. They try to carry this or try to meet this kind of middle ground because they probably were raised and brought up in a way that they were carnivores. And so the middle ground between this is, all right, I'll eat humanely raised. I'm not going to eat things, for the most part, that I think were tortured, bruised, and beaten. And yes, it's going to come to a short life, or at the very least, it's going to come to an end of its life, but it's going to do so in a way that is more so conducive with a regular life. Meaning it lives a life. It's not being abused. It's not being stuffed into a crate. It's not pecking something else to death. It's not standing in its own feces, shit and piss for God knows how long. It's not being given antibiotics. It's not being tortured. At the very least, I can rest my conscience to that part, to that degree, that thing, that life is not going to be tortured. How do you know? How do you know? I imagine the vegetarians that watch my channel will probably say, well, the only way you know is if you're not eating meat in the first place. One thing I would say, these laws and the way that Utah is going about going after people who are exposing this stuff makes it seem like you have something that you are trying to hide, and you're trying to protect factory farms and allowing those processes in which they're torturing their animals to proceed. This using the law that is not intended to be used in this way in order to attack people who expose a farm that was rancid is gross and disgusting, and I honestly hope these 6 people are able to get off. It is a shame that you're in Utah and that Utah is dominated by corporate interests in this way. There's always a lift. There's always a lift. And I say that to mean anytime somebody exposes something. Do you know Snowden is living in Russia right now? Snowden was doing God's work when he exposed something that the United States was doing that was grossly illegal. The United States was spying on the fucking world, not to mention on the entirety of the citizens in its country illegally. It was denoted that it was illegal. And yet, Snowden had to flee to Russia. Manning exposed that the Reuters agent was killed by a pilot in a chopper. He had no idea who he was shooting. He had no idea who he was killing. He murdered a reporter. Well, it wasn't the fact that he murdered the reporter that was the problem. That's business as usual. Well, the problem with this was that you exposed it. In one case after the next. It gets you across this idea on where the intentions or where the allegiances are. That you're going after people who are exposing things that are gross and that go against what's supposed to be our stated values and our stated ethics. Is it really against our stated ethics if you're protecting those things? So, these people are heroes. These people are martyrs. And hopefully these people are not going to have to go to prison and spend their time in a cell for doing something that essentially was God's work in exposing a rancid, repugnant organization. And by the way, when I say this knowing it's systemic. The drives and incentives into the system itself allows this thing to persist in the way it persists. If you allow somebody to get protection from any visibility, and in addition to getting protection from any visibility, they're going to float to this kind of lowest energy level of, I'm trying to make as much profit as I can make, meaning I need to get as many turkeys as I can get, and I don't necessarily need to have huge number of accommodations. I need to be able to cost-profit ratio. These turkeys are objects, they're not living beings, and they're things that I sell and they're eventually going to kill when they go to the butcher. Who gives a shit if they have a bad life? I need to maximize my profit, meaning I need to stuff as many of those turkeys in as possible. Also, I need to obfuscate this fact that I'm doing this by saying that these are mountain turkeys and they're in the wild and they're humane and natural, etc., etc., etc. Nobody will ever know. The Ag Act laws that had prevented it. I can tell you whatever the hell I want to tell you. You, as a person who's motivated by an interest of not necessarily eating something that's been abused and harmed, don't necessarily dig under the guise of it. You don't necessarily want to really know the truth about it. You kind of do, but you kind of don't. And at the end of the day, you're eating it, thinking to yourself, feeling pretty secure about your value system and how morally high you are in eating this particular bit of meat that's humanely raised. You're better than the others. Not so much. At least in the large share cases, not so much. They're still abusing these animals, and you have no idea whether or not those animals are humane or not. And this is a perfect example of you have no idea whether it's humane or not. And the idea that you're going to go after people who are exposing this nonsense, who's exposing stuff that goes absolutely contrary to what these people are saying that they're doing, and the public should know. Hey, by the way, capitalists, if your belief is people should be able to make rational decisions on the things that they purchase, how can you have a capitalistic system when it doesn't necessarily rely on people having actual information to make their purchases? This is not people having actual information to make a sane purchase. This is companies obfuscating and giving across false information that lie to people in their pursuit of trying to decide what they're going to purchase that's in their best interest. We're the capitalists. Aren't you upset and appalled by this, my libertarian friends? All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the patron. This article is at the bottom for you to read for yourself. It's long, but it's a good one, and it's damning. I'm not necessarily going to show the video itself because the video is heartbreaking to watch, but I would say bear it and watch it. Thanks, guys.